Hello, everyone. This is Joe Zappia from LVW Advisors, and I'm here with my partner, Jonathan Thomas. And this is the second in a series of videos that we plan on sharing with you, where we'll talk about important financial planning topics, at least topics that we find important. The title of our talk today is Why 2020 is the Year of the Roth IRA. So we're going to go into some pretty good detail in terms of what's changed with Roth IRAs and why we think it's super important that you have conversations with us regarding different ways you can do planning specifically related to Roth conversions. So before we dig into the meat of the conversation, what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about my prior views as it relates to Roth IRAs. So for a long time, Roths have been around for a couple of decades, and I've generally been a skeptic of Roth IRA conversions because it's my view that why would you ever pay a penny in tax before the IRS forces you to? And I have this just general distrust for our government that if you pay a tax on a Roth IRA, there would always be some likelihood later on that they could double tax you, and you would end up paying more tax than you needed to if you hadn't done anything with a Roth IRA to begin with. But the laws have changed. There's been some significant changes just in the past few months, and I believe tax rates right now may be as low as they will be, at least for the rest of my generation. So for the first time in a while, it really makes sense to begin doing some active planning in 2020 to have increase future wealth and reduce future taxes later on.
Definitely. I think it first makes sense to start off with what is a Roth IRA. And basically a Roth IRA is a retirement account funded with after-tax dollars that grows tax-free and then is tax-free upon any distribution. So this is unlike any traditional IRA, which is funded with pre-tax dollars, and then any distributions are taxed. The one benefit that we really like to the Roth IRA is that there's no required minimum distributions upon turning age 72 like there are with traditional IRAs. There's also a lot of flexibility with Roth IRAs. You can use them as an emergency savings vehicle if you choose. You can always take out the principal, but maybe not always sometimes the earnings. So you always have access to the principal. You might contribute to a Roth if your income is lower or projected to be lower today than it will be later in retirement when you may pull out the money. And so the topic of our conversation today is not only what is a Roth IRA, but what is a Roth conversion and why would you consider doing it? And a Roth conversion is just simply transferring money from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA. Now, ideally, you're paying any of the tax that is due from another account, some outside savings. So for example, you could do a $100,000 Roth conversion, transferring $100,000 from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA. You pay the other tax from the other savings. Now that $100,000 can grow tax-free and is distributed tax-free upon distribution. So basically that's it, Joe. That's a Roth IRA. That's what a Roth conversion is. But I think maybe now it makes sense. Let's talk about the 3 reasons why we think that 2020 is really the big year for Roth conversions.
Great. So there's several reasons, but I will try to put them in a hierarchy that I think is most important to least important, at least from our point of view. So the biggest change is with the Secure Act, which was passed in late 2019. This law took away the stretch IRA provision, something that had been in place for a long time. And as we mentioned in our first video, the stretch IRA provision was a very simple form of doing legacy and estate planning for individuals that had qualified assets, because they could leave them to beneficiaries, and the beneficiaries would be able to withdraw from those regular IRAs over the entire life expectancy of the beneficiary, thus the term stretch. Under the new law or the revised law, now the stretch provisions have been modified and mostly eliminated, requiring beneficiaries to withdraw money from IRAs within 10 years of receiving the funds. So if a 30-year-old were to receive or be a beneficiary of an IRA in the past, if their life expectancy was age 90, they'd have 60 years to withdraw that money. Under the new code, that money would have to come out by the time they're age 40. And the reason why it relates to converting regular IRAs to Roth IRAs is no longer do you have this benefit of leaving money qualified for a much longer period of time like you had before the stretch provision was taken away. And that makes Roth conversions that much more attractive, at least from our point of view. The second reason why it makes sense to consider Roth conversions is some individuals, when they hit age 70 or now the age of 72 for required mandatory distribution, some individuals don't need that money. They're just withdrawing it from the IRA simply because they're being forced to, and that money may not be supporting their annual living expenses. So in many cases, individuals will simply do the mandatory distribution, withhold the taxes, and then deposit the money into an after-tax investment account, effectively simply paying the tax because you're being forced to. So for individuals that have really large IRAs or don't need the money that a mandatory distribution would generate, converting money to a Roth IRA makes sense doing this prior to reaching mandatory distribution age, because Roths don't have required mandatory distributions. So not only do you convert dollars from being tax deferred to tax free, but you also eliminate potential future income taxes that could come from having forced required mandatory distributions that you may or may not need. And probably the last reason is what I alluded to earlier, and that is that right now taxes are low. If you look at the history of tax brackets in this country, the current marginal tax rates are among the lowest in history. And it's my view, given the recent healthcare crisis, the large federal deficit, that it appears to me anyways that the country is beginning to move a little bit more left. And as a result, all of those things are likely to result in higher taxes. It's my own view that if Vice President Biden is elected as president, taxes will increase sooner. And if President Trump is reelected, odds are pretty good that taxes will increase, but it will take a little bit longer. But either way, because conversions generate taxes in the year in which you do them, doing conversions in 2020, knowing what today's tax rates are super important, because tax rates are among the lowest in history. So I would say those are, in my view anyways, the three most significant or most important reasons why Roth conversions are important and why they're most attractive in 2020. Jonathan, what do you think?
Totally agree, Joe. I think hitting on your last point there around taxes, and we're going to throw up a graphic here. This is the tax rate pyramid. And so this looks at the marginal tax rates for individuals, or I should say, individuals that are married filing jointly, okay? So what you want to do here is focus on the taxable income over towards the right and find your marginal tax bracket. And the idea here is if you're in the green category or in the 10 to 12% taxable income range, you really want to stay within the green. You don't want to jump up into that yellow range, which is the 22% marginal tax bracket. Okay, and the same thing could be said for if you're in the 24%, you don't want to jump up into the 32nd percent. So the idea here is if you're in green, try to stay within green, so not generate too much income. And if you're in yellow, try to stay within yellow and not to jump into red, where now you're paying 32% on any of those withdrawals that we're talking about making this conversion.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is a template that we've used with many clients, and that is speaking with their tax advisor, their CPA, to say, at what level do Mr. and Mrs. Jones go into the next marginal tax bracket, because we'd like to do a Roth conversion on the amount under that at that lower tax rate. However, I will tell you that we have also done some pretty detailed illustrations for individuals in the highest marginal tax rate. And it's interesting that even if you're in the highest marginal tax rate, Roth conversions in 2020 make sense in most cases.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You never want to pay more tax than you have to. You always want to pay at the lowest rate possible. The hard part is we don't know what tax rates are going to be. And like you said, Joe, it's likely that rates are going to be higher 10, 20 years from now. So take advantage of the lower rates and take advantage of being in a low tax bracket if you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's just sort of summarize a little bit of what we just talked about. We think 2020 is the year of the Roth IRA for the reasons we mentioned. There's been a significant change in the law with regard to the Secure Act, the loss of the stretch provisions. We think Roth IRAs make sense for most people. Whether you're funding IRAs at a younger age, like Jonathan, less so much if you're me at an older age. If you're older and you don't need the income the income that'll come from a required mandatory distribution, a Roth conversion makes sense to reduce future taxes. If you have no intention on spending your IRA and you'd really like to leave it to your beneficiaries, converting to a Roth creates a much more tax-friendly and a much more investment-friendly vehicle for your beneficiary. So there's a whole list of reasons why Roth conversions make sense and why they really make sense in 2020. So now what I think we should do is let's make it real. Let's talk specifically about questions that clients are asking us, specific situations, of course, leaving the names out of some planning scenarios that we've done, and just some different thoughts in terms of real life planning, so that we can take conceptually what we discussed and actually put it into some real examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one question or maybe concern, someone may be watching this video and saying, well, I may fit into this category, but I may not. What other things may prompt me to consider doing a Roth conversion, or at least go down the path of looking at it? And I think you need to assess your current income for the year. So maybe let's assume you're a business owner and your income is rather unstable this year, unfortunately. Maybe you own a restaurant or a couple of restaurants in town. Maybe your income isn't going to be as high as you thought it was. You can pull from your IRAs and make that Roth conversion this year during a low income year. Conversely, what if you had budgeted $20,000, $30,000 for travel this year? You had a big vacation planned, a cruise in Europe or something, and unfortunately, you're not going to do it this year. You might do it next year, but you're not going to do it this year. What if you took out that money from your traditional IRA and made the Roth conversion this year? That probably makes sense. And then the third reason, and I think this is more opportunistic and you need to be a little bit quick, as we saw in March, but with the market being down, and it's still down for the year, now is a good time, and it's a better time than it was, say, in January, to do that Roth conversion. Because then you do the Roth conversion, the money's in the Roth IRA, and hopefully with the rebound and the recovery that will take place, it will take place in the Roth IRA, which is now tax-free.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction. Again, regular IRAs, qualified accounts such as 401ks, et cetera, they are tax-deferred vehicles. So while you get to use the government's money while the IRA compounds and you're contributing to it or markets go up, you have to remember that whatever the current tax rate is when you begin withdrawing that money, you have to pay taxes on it. So if you had $1 million IRA and you're in the 30% tax bracket, you really should make an assumption that 300,000 of that money is the government's and only 700,000 of that money is yours. So by converting to a Roth and then experiencing that growth, in that same example, that entire $1 million is yours because you've already paid taxes on those dollars. And it's important. It's an important distinction. And when we, Jonathan, think about it, when we built we built spreadsheets and done pretty detailed analysis based upon very different and specific situations, I really don't think we've come across a situation where it was obvious that a conversion did not make sense. There's been many instances where it was more than obvious that a conversion makes the most sense. So, what are some of the other questions that we're getting? What can you think of?
Yeah, I think some questions that we may be getting would be like, do I have to do this all at once? Is this something I could wait until the end of the year? Do I have to, let's say, for example, Joe, you and I, we do some modeling with a client and we show that we're going to do $50,000 or $100,000 Roth conversions for the next 3 to 5 years. Is that something that you have to sign up for today, or is it more of a wait and see approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is you absolutely don't need to sign up to do that today. You can make a decision each and every year about how much can be part or all. There's no real restrictions around it, how much you can convert from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. So, and you have until the end of the year to do it. So that's why we're being very proactive now with our clients and reaching out and actively talking to them about understanding what a Roth conversion is, understanding why 2020 is the year in which it should be seriously considered, and then modeling out exactly what it will look like from the standpoint of what taxes will be owed this year to do the conversion, and then what the potential benefit is 10 years and 15 and 20 years down the line, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think, the other question is, what are the distribution rules as far as the Roth IRA goes? Is it something that I can tap into immediately? Do I have to wait a certain number of years? I think we're getting that quite often.
Yeah, we definitely are. So yeah, so I'll hit on a couple. You can finish up on any that I missed. So as it relates to traditional IRAs, if again, just to compare and contrast, in case everyone doesn't know the difference, a traditional IRA, if you need to access those funds before you're 59 and a half, under normal circumstances, you will pay a 10% penalty plus income taxes on money you would withdraw. So, in the lovely state of New York, if you're in even, a medium marginal bracket plus New York State income tax, you're giving up 40 cents on the dollar, right? In a Roth IRA, when you do withdrawals, because you've already paid tax on the basis or the principal that you're putting into the Roth IRA, that money is available to you to withdraw really day one. Okay, and as it relates to any money that's earned inside of the Roth IRA, that money needs to be in the IRA for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, you can withdraw that money without penalty. Without penalty, of course, you need to pay income taxes on that money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Correct? And I think the biggest thing here is, what is the purpose of doing a Roth IRA? It is not so that we can access the money within 5 years, or maybe not even within our lifetime. Most of the time, it is going to be the last bucket that we're ever going to pull from for cash flow in retirement. And most of the time, it is for the next generation, for the reasons that you mentioned, Joe, because there's no stretch IRA, because your beneficiaries, who could be at a very high tax bracket, will have to take out that money within 10 years, and they may be paying a lot in taxes. So let's help offset that a little bit, pay the taxes now, they won't have to pay later. So again, ideally the last bucket, but absolutely not money that we really want to touch. Right.
Here's a question that my peers don't ask me, but I'm sure some of your peers ask you. Someone is a few years into employment or makes a job change and joins a company, and they have an opportunity to either fund a regular 401k or a Roth 401k. What advice do you give them?
Yeah, I think for me, it's simple. It's always the Roth 401k, assuming that their income is not, $1 million a year, where a lot of that's going directly to the government. I think it does make sense to sort of hedge your tax rate risk, if you will. So maybe you think about divvying up some assets in a traditional IRA and some also in the Roth IRA or Roth 401k. But, as it stands today, with tax rates being what they are, it's hard to make a case that a traditional IRA is going to pay off over the long run, especially for a young person.
Yeah, even losing that current income tax deduction, right? Because the tax-free nature of the Roth over time just far and away exceeds the tax deduction benefit today, right? Mm-hmm. What other questions are you getting?
I don't know if I'm getting too many other questions. I think what may be helpful now is to talk about some real life examples.
Sure.
So we're doing this all the time with clients. And like you said, Joe, this isn't something that you or I were really talking about a whole lot with clients last year, 3 to 5 years ago, et cetera. It's really brought up a lot of different opportunities that didn't exist. And so I think, one client that comes to mind that we're working with, clients in their, let's say, mid 70s. So they typically take RMDs, let's call it $50,000 a year. Now they're already collecting Social Security, they're already collecting a pension, and they live pretty well within their means. So they don't need the RMD. They're not even spending all of it. A lot of it is just being put in their savings account. So what we did was we modeled, what if we instead took that $50,000 that was supposed to be the RMD and we moved it over to the Roth IRA, paying those taxes from that savings account, and then using a savings or a taxable account as any living expenses that they may need to fund their expenses, on top of their Social Security and their pension. And so the reason we did that was because their plan was in such great shape. We really knew they weren't going to need the money in their lifetime, and the money was really there for their kids, their 2 kids and grandkids. So we said, let's move over a little bit today. I think it was $50,000 or $100,000. And we'll do that wait and see approach. Maybe next year we do the same thing, or if rates change or the markets change,
income need changes, life changes, right? So a couple of key points there. I just want to make sure that this comes across, because this particular individual or couple, they would have had to have paid income tax anyway, because they were forced to take a mandatory distribution.
Correct.
Right? So because they didn't need the money, pay the same taxes, but instead do a Roth conversion. It's a no-brainer. So, I think really for any individual that has in the past taken their mandatory distribution and then simply deposited the extra proceeds into their savings account or into their investment account and then left it alone, should now at the very least, put those proceeds into a Roth IRA as a conversion. The other thing, and Jonathan, you've been really good about getting me to think this way, and I think it's the power of having multiple brains, one younger, one older, is investors tend to bucket. It's just mental accounting is a bias that we have, and one of the things you can do when you make a decision to do this Roth conversion, for example, the individuals or the couple you're referring to, is you can take that money now and you can bucket it, and you can say, okay, we already know you don't need this money. So now let's invest this money for the next generation. So while your overall portfolio, Mr. and Mrs. Client, might be very conservatively positioned because you have all the assets you need and you're conservative investors, but now we've taken a piece of that wealth that you've created over your lifetime, we put it into a vehicle that's tax-free. We've done it during a year that it's minimized taxes. And now that money can be invested much more aggressively outside of how you would normally invest money, because now you're thinking about that money in a bucketed way for either your children or even potentially your grandchildren. And that's pretty powerful.
Think about how powerful that is, Joe, right? Like that client's 75, they could easily live to 100. Today's modern technology, right? Who knows? It could be even longer.
Yeah, they could just do Zoom meetings. They won't need to get in a car and reduce the risk of accidents on the road. They can just Zoom everybody.
Yeah. So they could live to, let's say, 25 years. That money is going to grow. And if it's invested as if it were that client, it could be very conservative and it's not really going to grow a lot. Let's say it keeps up with inflation. They're not going to need the money anyway. So instead, like you're saying, let's make it more aggressive where it's almost 100% in stocks. That over 25 years, that's likely going to double twice, whatever we convert today.
Right. Yeah.
It's really a no-brainer. So that's
it's
what I love about the bucket.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's so true. And again, I thank you for getting me to think this way. But a lot of times we think about how we add value in relationships, and this is just an interesting aside that I just thought of. So, too many times investors or even advisors, or for certainly the idiots on TV, are so focused on what's the market doing and how are individual investors doing. If we pay attention to these sort of changes in real time to the tax law, and then we structure thoughtful financial planning ideas and actually implement them for clients, we can potentially create tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of either tax savings or additional wealth for individuals. And the conversation completely shifts from, how am I doing relative to the market, to let's start to think about how we can minimize taxes and maximize whatever your goals are. And in this case, one of the goals is to get as much money to children as possible. So another example is somewhat similar, younger family, very wealthy, have money in IRAs. And it's a really simple example, and that is that won't ever really need to access these IRAs. These IRAs are there. They have all the wealth that they need between a business that they own and their after-tax assets. So these IRAs are really set to grow, except they will have a problem in just a few years. They'll be forced to take mandatory distributions. And all that's going to do is add income into an already high tax bracket. So what we did in this instance is we built out some models. We worked with the client's CPA, and what we found was that even using a steady state of taxes, it makes sense to pay the taxes today, even if in a higher bracket, to get that money into a place where now all of the earnings on that money is tax-free, not only now, but to the beneficiaries, and avoid these RMDs, which would potentially compound an already bad tax situation. So something as simple as acknowledging that you most likely won't need the assets in the IRA allow you to think about things like conversions today. And then you also have the opportunity in that scenario to do exactly as what we just talked about in terms of bucketing those assets for more long-term and having them be invested more for long-term growth.
Yeah. Two examples of many that we've gone through, and I'm sure we will go through the rest of this year. There just seems to be too much opportunity out there this year, 2020. I think the three reasons we hit on there. And so, in summary, I think the Roth IRA is really like the golden goose of investing. You want to get as much money into that thing as possible. You want to do so when, your income is low enough and tax rates are somewhat favorable enough to do so. And we think that this year could be it. I mean, is there anything else that you have, Joe?
No, I think this is probably the most important financial planning topic so far that we've come across in 2020. And what's interesting is we don't think enough people are talking about it. We don't think enough advisors are making this a priority, and we certainly don't think investors are thinking about doing Roth conversions, primarily because it requires paying income taxes today. But when modeled out and illustrated correctly and built into a thoughtful financial plan, it's to us, it's in most instances an obvious solution. So great. Well, I would say that's a wrap. I'm sure that we answered a few questions, but we probably also generated some questions that were not answered, and we're always here to help. And we encourage you to reach out to us and let us know what you think of this video, and also reach out to us if you want to talk further about anything we discussed or have additional questions.
Awesome. Until next time.